Good evening and welcome to the Wyndham-Raymond School District Board of Directors workshop meeting. Today is November 19th and it is 6:30. And this evening for our workshop agenda, we have Wyndham High School Principal Chris Howell joining us. And he's going to discuss a proposed capstone project for Wyndham High School students. So, yeah, so Chris,
welcome.
take it away.
Know how to draw a crowd, I guess. Okay, that's just a copy of what was in the note, which may be already in your packets, but. Yeah, how are you tonight?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
You have this in your packets and all?
I didn't see it in here.
No.
Thank you.
Do you want to hand me a stack and I'll pass?
You want to pass those down?
Yep.
And I'll do these. All set?
All set.
This is the second time I've had a chance to come before the board, I think this particular academic year, to talk about the possibility of a capstone. And I had a chance to send the board some information beforehand. If we had public here, we'd give them a copy so they have a chance to see the notes and things that I wrote to you. But one of the things that the board asked me to do was to take a look at how would a capstone actually have an impact on the current graduation policy, and then possibly what would a capstone look like for Wyndham High School students. And so tonight, I thought it would be good to start off with just a kind of reminder for the public and a reminder for the board what the current graduation requirements are. We have our friend Ayanna here, who's our student representative. Ayanna will be receiving one of these sometime in the neighborhood of around June 7 at the Cumberland County Civic Center, which is our diploma case. This one's empty. But in the case of a diploma and how a student earns a diploma, for policy right now is all based on credits. And we can quickly run down through here, and I'm on the first page. 4 credits of English, credit and a half U.S. history, credit and a half world history, civic and economics for half credit, mathematics 4 credits, science 3 credits in 3 different science courses, 1 credit of a fine art, a credit of health, a credit of physical education, computer proficiency. And for those of you who've not been on the board for a while, computer proficiency when this was written was actually in the late 90s, when computers in schools was actually a bit of a novelty. And it was basic operations of computers. It was not meant to be at that time Microsoft Office proficient. At that time was meant, can you do basic functions with a machine? And then L, that last piece there, which is the community service. And under that star there, students must complete community service requirements as stated in Exhibit A. And I included some language for you for Exhibit A. And there are some rough guidelines for what community service can be. But for graduating classes, students need to complete 40 hours of community service. And basically, the policy talks more about activities that students are not receiving any sort of a monetary reimbursement for, and really talks more about how the community service is going to be recorded. And what I gave to each of you on that little half sheet of paper is a community service form. And Ayanna, I'm sure that you've seen several of those, but each time that a student completes a community service activity of their own choosing, they would fill out that form. There's a box in student services and they drop it off. And as long as a student accumulates 40 hours, the 40 hours don't have to be in any particular one item. It's up to the student's choosing. So if they want to babysit, if they want to go help a neighbor, if they want to shovel, as long as they're not receiving any financial compensation for it and they're volunteering their time, right now it falls under the community service. And there's been quite a bit of discussion at the board level with community service, and I cannot remember the first date in which community service came in, but we're looking at class of 2011, we probably were looking at 2008, 2009 when community service first became a requirement. And the way that it worked was that each year a student was enrolled would be looking to do 10 hours. There was great debate, great discussion in 2008 when this was brought as a graduation requirement. And part of that discussion was, is it service learning or is it community service? And there was a split at that time, if I remember correctly, from the board. And basically at that point, community service won over service learning, and this particular requirement was put into place. Each year, we track student community service hours, and Ms. Marston, who works in the Student Services Office, is responsible for putting that in Infinite Campus. And Infinite Campus will only hold 200 hours of community service as a placeholder, and then anything beyond that, we go ahead and we keep track of. And so students are required to do the minimum. We recognize each year at our, during graduation ceremonies week, we recognize students who accumulate large numbers of community service hours, but really that 40 minimum. Starting in about February, we start running numbers on senior class, and we'll have times where we'll have anywhere from students who've completed 0 community service hours to their full 40 and above. And then we start working on making sure, reminding students that community service is in fact something that they need to do. It's difficult to measure what the impact of that particular graduation requirement has been on students. The only thing that it has done is that it's required all students to be able to meet that requirement, and that's really, as far as a tangible impact on the community, I'm not sure how we can measure that. Because each of the students, as they accumulate their community service, are responsible for having an adult in the community sign off on those hours. We do not check those hours, nor do we have the capacity to check the 40 for the 250 plus students who would be accumulating during their senior year or the years that are going beyond. So that is our current graduation policy. Wasn't sure if that person over there could hear me. So right now, if you want to earn a diploma from Windham High School, you need to complete those credit requirements, and you need to complete the 40 hours of community service. One of the things that we've talked about as a possible requirement is transitioning from a community service base to a capstone base, which is in a capstone base, students would be taking an item of interest or an area of interest, working with a mentor, and with that mentor, either picking up a new skill, learning something about something that they're particularly passionate about, and working with that mentor to say, how can I take that item that I'm interested in and then have a community focus with it. And every student, I am absolutely convinced, every student has a gift, and every student has an area of passion. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is that how do we satisfy the spirit of what was put into place with the community service hours? How do we satisfy the spirit of giving back to the community, not through a rigid set of hours, but through the possibility of some student-led projects where students get to decide through something that they've learned, a particular passion, how they give back to the community. And one of the things that I wrote to you in my notes is that I think this is an opportune time for us to have this discussion of capstone versus community service. And the reason behind that is the policy in which this falls is the graduation policy, policy IKF. And we don't open that policy very often. And so right now that policy is going to be opened. The policy committee started on it about a month and a half ago with Angela Hardy from Great Schools Partnership. We met again, I think it was on Monday of this week, and started to look at the language in that policy. Because as all of us know, and Christine's been here to talk to you, that we have a shift in graduation policy statewide from credit-based diploma to diploma based on proficiency, demonstrating that you've met the standards in all content areas. And so while we have that policy open, now is a great time to re-examine community service versus the idea of a capstone of students helping to drive what their community service might look like or what their community impact might be. And if you go to, and I think it's the 3rd page, and I didn't number the pages for you, but under proposed IKF, I'm at the bold part, third page, about a third of the way down. For students for the class of 2015 to possibly as late as the class of 2020, we'd be looking at the traditional graduation requirements now based upon credit. And the credit items that you see there are pretty standard to what we have now. Commencing down, and says commencing with the class of 2020, that may be as late as 2021, we'll be graduating students based on proficiency in those 8 content areas. And you've heard me come and talk to you before. High school has developed graduation standards with performance indicators. What does it look like to meet those standards? We are embedding those in curriculum within course content, and we will be looking at students not only earning or not only passing a course to make sure that they have all of the content understanding in that, but in addition to that, receiving feedback as to how they've met the standards in that. And so that's the model that we've been using for graduation, all 8 content areas. And I think as we have a chance to take a look at that graduation policy, that will continue to kind of flesh out for us, you know, what that might look like for our students. In addition to that, students will have to demonstrate that they've met proficiency in the guiding principles. And guiding principles there: clear and effective communicator, self-directed lifelong learner, creative and practical problem solver, responsible and involved citizen, integrative and informed thinker. Those are the pieces that we would want any student graduating from Windham High School, or any student who's made their way through the RSU, that they could demonstrate those 5 items. And in fact, in the original 96 learning results, those 5 things were actually put above the content standards as being more important than content was that students could demonstrate these items that are there. Let's go down to B3 there in bold, because this is an item that will be present when we bring forward a graduation policy. All students will complete a capstone project through which students will demonstrate their knowledge, skills, and work habits by conducting in-depth research, using technological applications, producing a high-quality exhibition of learning, and presenting their research and findings to a review panel. That's in essence what a capstone project is that the research part, being able to use technology to navigate your way through the research, looking at a way to exhibit your learning, and then the last part there, presenting what you find to a review panel, whether that be the mentor that you have, or whether that be peers, or whether that be faculty members. And one thing that we've talked about as a faculty is that when I complete a capstone project, I'm a student at Windham High School, this doesn't have to be under the umbrella of mentors at Windham High School. This is a great opportunity to engage the community into particular areas of passion. We have formulated some great relationships with business partners, not only in the communities of Windham and Raymond, but also now into Greater Portland. And this would be a great opportunity to strengthen those relationships through matching students up with mentors to areas of interest, and then having students work with that mentor to say, first of all, what is it that I'm going to learn? And then from that, how am I going to go ahead and give back to my community? Which is service learning, not necessarily the community service option that so far has been part of the Windham High School diploma requirements. We have looked as a committee at multiple options, and there are some capstone projects that we've looked at which are very expensive. They're expensive in personnel, as far as there are some schools who have had added staff in order to have people that would go ahead and manage capstone projects. There are projects that have become quite large with extensive written portions and that haven't been necessarily focused on the new learning. And one of the best models that we came across, and this is why I included in your packet and didn't just go ahead and grab it and start making it Windham, is want to give credit to Berwick Academy. And I attached onto your packets, and I think it also went as a separate attachment in your email that you received this week. But this is was actually brought forward by our librarian, Amy Denneker. Because if those of you who know Ms. Denneker, who runs our library, She has done a tremendous job over the last 5 years that she's been here, bringing the school into the library and making the library an integral part of Wyndham High School. Ayana's shaking her head, so absolutely could agree with that. She brought this forward to the committee. The Innovation Center, which runs out of the library at Berwick Academy. In this case, it's actually a program that students apply to. I think we can make it into a capstone project. But in this particular project, students have to apply. They actually work in the Innovation Center through a mentor, or through a coordinator who then sets them up with mentors. But they identify an area of learning. They work with that mentor to kind of sketch out what their project's going to look like. There's an expectation, again, to sit down with that mentor and look at what is my community influence going to be. And some examples I saw on their website, a student who wanted to learn wanted fire science, wanted to learn what it was like to become a firefighter. They worked with their mentor, they took the basic firefighting course, volunteered some time to the community with firefighting, and then turned that into a college essay, and then also made some great connections. Another young lady interested in meteorology and found some meteorologists in the local area to be able to spend some time with, did some volunteer time, was able to get out in the community, do measurements, learned an awful lot about the meteorology, the field of meteorology, and then also had the opportunity to build her skills and again, make herself a better quantity as she was competing for spots beyond the particular school. What I like about this model, I like the idea that it's very much student-driven. Because as you think about something becoming a graduation requirement, this means all students need to participate. And what I can see in a process such as this is that there's an opportunity for all kids to pursue their passion. All kids have a gift. All kids, you can actually work to find what it is. I like the opportunity also because many of the capstones we looked at depended entirely upon faculty. I like the idea of using outside mentors. We have many individuals, and if you actually had a chance to go to our career fair, college and career fair that we had a couple weeks ago, we had 120 different organizations at Wyndham High School talking to our kids. Many of those individuals came up to me afterwards and said, how do we continue to partner with students? Outside mentors is a great way to continue to partner. The other thing I really like about this is I think it starts to give for us, for service learning, it starts to give a background and it starts to give a piece of ownership as to why is it worth my time to go through and do this. You know, we've received emails in the past and sometimes they're quite comical. Emails about community service is nothing more than slave labor to the community. It's amazing what you get for emails sometimes. But looking for this to be saying, you know what, here's an opportunity for students to pursue their passion and then to do something about it in their community. We would look at this to replace either a portion of the current community service hours that are within the graduation policy. I don't know what the board's feeling, but depending upon how the board is feeling, I would also be in support of removing the community service option and putting a capstone in its place with some very specific parameters as far as what students need to complete. We have students now who are currently in the high school coming in as freshmen who some have started community service hours, some haven't. But if this is something that we wanted to get started sooner than later than waiting for a graduation policy, things going forward, we could start it definitely with this freshman class with some sort of a transition plan. But really what this comes down to, because this is a graduation requirement and you as a board have the opportunity through policy and through statute to, on top of the state minimum graduation requirements, you have the ability to add additional items on top of those requirements for a diploma from Wyndham High School. I guess what we're asking for the board to consider is refocusing that community service requirement to service learning through a capstone project for our students. And so when I wrote this, I think on the, I think we're in the 4th page in, excuse me, the 5th page in, a couple proposals for consideration. First part there was reduce the number of community service hours, and this is if the board is still desiring that we keep community service hours within the policy, reduce from 40 to 20 and make the capstone project requirement for diploma. If the board would actually like to go in a different direction, another possibility would be to go forward with the capstone project and reduce the 40 entirely, with the understanding that students are going to be putting that many hours, if not more, into a project in which they're going to be doing some individual learning parts, but then also looking to then serve the community. If this was going to be put into place as a graduation requirement, I think I showed in that sample policy that we'll have an element where students will still have a credit requirement, and then we'll be transitioning in 2021 to the proficiency-based diploma part. We could add it into that 2015 to 2020 graduation part, so it would be in the new graduation policy as a capstone for credits, in the new graduation policy for proficiency-based diploma as a capstone part. You know, it's a shift in thinking. It's a shift in how we've distributed diplomas and how we've awarded diplomas. So I'm really kind of interested tonight the workshop to see kind of where the board is landing on this, and what additional information that you might need from us at Wyndham High School.
I have a question just on the time. I don't know, if you talk to anybody at Berwick Academy, what kind of time do the students spend? Is this something they do their senior year? Do they start their junior year?
There are projects that students do at varying levels because of they have different levels of their academy. There's an upper level, there's a middle level, and there's a lower level. They have students who are doing them at different parts of the year. At Berwick Academy, it's not a graduation requirement. This is something that students apply to do. We would have something that students would be doing, and in what we'd be proposing, we would start students at their end of their junior year. The other element that I think as we start to think with students, I think the presentation and the presentation skills are absolutely just as important as the learning parts. I would be looking to have students be giving those presentations towards the end of the school year, or at a time if they wanted to schedule earlier. And one of the things that we've been discussing, and I think I mentioned it last time I was here, replacing that week of senior finals with some presentations by students. And then also, and I would love to see a whole community presentation with all 250 projects where the community has a chance to come in and see what impact that Wyndham High School students have had on the community and the different things that they've learned, and make it an interactive part. The other piece, and I forgot to mention this when I was going through, I think I mentioned in my writing, it would be an additional opportunity for students during their senior year who hadn't demonstrated one of those 5 guiding principles. It would be an opportunity for them, again, to meet that, and I hate to say checked off, but to show that they've demonstrated or show that they've met the guiding principles, and especially that clear and effective communicator. Those skills are paramount that they have. Did I answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Would those guiding principles otherwise be displayed through community service? Is that typically the way that those are?
Right now, they're not currently measured. Under new proficiency-based diploma law, we are required to measure them. We are in the process right now of determining how we'll measure them, the rubrics that are used, and we are moving forward with a model of universal rubrics that apply to all subject areas, and it is our plan to be reporting out in all content areas in the guiding principles. So in addition to reporting out on content, be reporting out on those guiding principles for each of the courses that students take.
So as you were going through your research to see what other schools were doing, did you get an opportunity to see what Baxter Academy of Technology and Science is doing?
I've not had a chance to look at Baxter.
So I got to go to their open house last night to see what they were about. And they have what they call Flex Fridays, where they take all their coursework Monday through Thursday, and Friday is basically they're working on a capstone project that they're doing every year. They work on it in small groups though, and it sounds similar to what you're doing. It might be an interesting thing to look at to get some of their parameters
Absolutely.
there too. But they were saying it needed to be something innovative, ethical, and I think there was a third component to what they had their project to do. But they were actually building things, so things like creating a motorcycle that was handicap accessible, and more technology focused, because that's they're a STEM school. But I thought it would be a great idea to bring some of those principles into this too, to let them create things, not just go off and do it almost sounds like an independent study to some extent, what you're proposing. Where you're going and learning something that someone else already knows, but can we expand it a little bit to actually creating something new, to be something that they're thinking outside the box and not just learning what somebody else has already learned?
And a student could choose to do that if that's an area that they're particularly passionate about. I think one thing when you look at a capstone part is that, or even on any project required for graduation, it's all students. And so maybe not every single student is going to build something, but hopefully every student is going to have something that they're particularly interested in, and then can work with a mentor. And again, a mentor either inside the school or outside of the school, in order to be able to help and support them.
Have you thought at all about letting students form groups to do this, or did you want them to all be individual, one student, one mentor?
I would like to see it be individual.
Yeah.
Especially when it's high stakes.
Yeah.
Which any time that you make it a graduation requirement, it is high stakes. We want to make sure that all students have a portion of it, and that also, in the case of this, that we also have the opportunity to measure what each student has done to give to the process, so that we make sure that if in fact we're using it to show that they've met guiding principles, that we're giving students credit where credit is due, or proficiency where proficiency is due.
Right. And what about funding? So some of these projects, if they're creating something, they may need grant money to do something, right? It's not all this stuff is free to develop and learn. Do we have are we planning on funding, giving them some kind of budget? Do they need to go out and raise their own money?
I would say we don't have any money to do this. I mean, right now, community service does have a cost. Right now, as a board, you are paying a stipend to a person who coordinates and sends out community service opportunities to students on a yearly basis. That is something that you put into place back, and I think it was in 2008, that's there. I think one thing we'd have to take a look at is that transferring those funds to somebody who could help line up mentors for students, make those connections. And I think also Nicole Sturgis, which through the College and Career Center, which many of you now are familiar with, which is kind of now in a central hub spot in our school, also using the relationships and business relationships that she's developed to kind of support some of those. But as far as a student who wanted to build something in particular, I think in this case we wouldn't have the funding in order to be able to support that, unless we could get some innovative funds to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, thanks, Chris. Can you help me just understand the timing of this a little bit more?
Sure.
And has there been any thought into staggering this? Because, on the one hand, we have 40 hours of community service as it stands right now, which students could theoretically spread across 4 years. The capstone project we're thinking about starting at the end of their junior year, which means a whole senior year, or one, being condensed basically into a little more than 1 year to do this. So I'm just wondering, how long do you think, or how many hours would have to be devoted to this? And if we're holding off on it until the end of a student's time in school, I think about the students that come into their senior year having to make up credits. I mean, this is fine for the students that are on track and good planners and stuff, but those that kind of put off things to the last year as far as meeting their credits and things of that nature. If you can just maybe elaborate.
Sure. I think, and it's a great point, because I think a key to the success of a project like this is actually not to start junior year and not to start sophomore year, but to even start freshman, sophomore year, at least with letting students know that far ahead of time that this is something that's coming, and if it's something that you could then start the planning process for. You know, as far as number of hours that students would need to complete senior year, I mean, theoretically, a student could start this, but the end point would have to be that graduation point of when they get it done. So I think, if anything, you would set end of junior year as the deadline for having set a project. If a student wants to go earlier with that and work with someone to set a project ahead of time, basically you're saying that students need to complete this and have that end point to be prepared for their end of their senior year. So theoretically, a student could get started ahead of time, work on this, make it a long-term relationship, and then they'd be looking to then present their final piece at the end of their senior year. We could do that, but we, you know, right now we have students who have 0 community service hours in May, and they're graduating in June, and somehow they figure out how that they're going to go ahead and do that. You know, part of this, I was absolutely right, is time management. You know, it's my hope to create something that kind of ties into students' passion and interest. So it's something that they're motivated to do, or it's something that you can easily sit down with a student, identify to say, here's something that you're really interested in, who are we going to connect you with, and then how can you make your project progress.
Right, yeah, I'm just thinking too, with 250 students all trying to present at the same time, you know, if there was a way to maybe stagger it, I don't know, at 3 different times during the senior year, just not only for the students' benefit, but just the resources that it's going to take to support the students in terms of mentors and people in the community. You know, if you're trying to put all those demands on for 250 students at once, it could get pretty thin in terms of resources. So, just some thoughts that I have.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you, sir. I endorse the capstone, but I still need more information about it. I like the idea that it's student-driven. I also have concerns about resources. I never expected this to be funded as you might expect at a Baxter Academy. I never expected there be a monetary amount given to each student because we don't have that capacity. But what I do know about myself and about students is procrastination is huge. And what I would like to see, what would be, I can only speak in terms of how do you get people to do things, and you break it into smaller parts. And when I hear, okay, you're going to do a capstone and you have to do a presentation, and I'm in the weeds now, and I'm fully acknowledging I am like knee deep in weeds right now. But what I think it can't be. It kind of feels like we're throwing them without giving them small bites of instruction on how do you come up with a big project. And what are the components of that? There's public speaking. Now, how do we address the public speaking? We expect them to be clear and effective communicators, but what are we doing to help them as far as instruction to get that skill? And I know that that's the guiding principle is throughout their whole career in all their classes, but to get back to the time point, and I too wrestle with the end of the junior year, and I kind of like it, and this is just me, and I don't know anything, but breaking it down into kind of a template. Our expectation is your sophomore year that you pick a topic. And maybe and this is arbitrary, and I'm just throwing this out, but I feel like there needs to be smaller pieces because we want to help them. We don't want to say, and again, maybe you haven't created the rubric, what the expectation, so I don't see that anywhere here, and I know it's early. But I also want this to be instruction on our end too. I want it to be passion driven, but I want them at the end to say, yeah, I learned something about what I'm passionate about, but if I'm not passionate about something, these are the steps for a project that I might have at work or I might have in community that I can fall back on. Geez, I'm doing this thing. It's not work related. But I remember when I did the capstone, and so maybe if I do this first, and then I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this, it'll all come together. And so I think for me, it feels like there needs to be a little bit more structure to it, and maybe you've already thought of that, you probably have. But I would have to agree, senior year is just a nightmare in so many ways. I mean, am I right? I mean, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it is.
I don't want, and chime in with, it's a lot of pressure. I mean, you're trying to get all your credits in. You've got this whole college gig or whatever that you're trying to work out, and the applications, and I mean, that's like mid-year. I mean, that's a full-time job, doing that your senior year, really. And the pressure is enormous, and there's a lot to it. There's the applications and all of that. So my worry is that, you know, then of course the wait till the spring. And it's not going to be as thoughtful, you know, if it's just, I don't know, am I wrong here?
No, absolutely not.
And that's why we steered away from the capstones that were the 15 to 20 page projects. That became actually, instead of something to look forward to, became a stressor in students' lives with that. But you're absolutely right, Kate. There actually needs to be simple, discrete steps as far as here's what happened sophomore year, here's when you identify your mentor, here's what you're going to do with that first meeting with your mentor, here's the second meeting with your mentor, here are the things that you're going to do in between. Those are things that we still need to develop and still need to be put into place, and I agree with you 100%. I will tell you though, for seniors I sat down with last year who were short on community service hours, in an hour I could have easily mentored them to a project because I knew their passion, where they would have rather have gone and done that than to go and find somebody to sign off on some hours. So I don't think it's going to be that hard to kindle the passion in some students to be able to pursue something of their individual interest. I think the other thing for students, that if we take a look at senior finals, which they've already had an opportunity on, all students now, freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, take a final in a course. They all have that experience. Having that take the place of that week before graduation, which is the senior final part, or even, you know, one of the things we've tossed around is, you know, if students feel like they're ready, let's do them in March, let's do them in April, let's pull some panels together, but to really give it in those little small bites where students are doing little pieces at a time. But part of this is also, how do you foster the engagement? Because that's one thing that community service hours I don't think is given to us. I don't think it's given us that level of engagement that we had hoped for from students.
Well, that leads me to the whole mentor piece, which I think is fabulous, but I think is daunting to a high schooler. For most, not necessarily the 10%, to find a mentor. And so I would think we would need some mechanism to assist them in that, because that's like the huge stumbling block. You know, you have a big project and you just can't get going. You can't go. And it's like, oh, I don't have a mentor. Oh, I don't have a mentor. Oh, you need something to get them to pull the trigger, and I think that could be a huge stumbling block if we don't assist them. And again, I'm in the weeds, and I guess before I could even sign off on a capstone, there's a lot more structure that I would need to see how you're going to implement this, what it looks like. And then my other piece is the engagement with the community, which is we're asking, that's what we're looking for, is engagement from her, which I fully endorse, and I think is a nice bridge between the educational piece of a community and the business piece of a community and the surrounding area. And I think that's a fabulous marriage that could be fostered. And what comes to mind is the Chamber of Commerce, and maybe having somebody, and it used to be Steve McFarland, I don't know if it still is or not, engaged with them and partner with them, and they might even have, from a mentor standpoint, some thoughts on how to proceed. Because if we're relying on the mentor to guide the students, there's gotta be a little bit, almost like a mentor packet, you know.
Absolutely.
What, okay, you want me to be a mentor, what does that mean? And let's lay it out, and here you go, and here's the time frame, and if you sign on to be a mentor, what would be the expectation? Because the worst thing that can happen is you get somebody who has a mentor and then poops out on the student. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then that's like, ugh. And again, I mean, these are all little, you know me, I'm like.
Absolutely, and you know, we'd be more than happy to come back with that. I guess, you know, one of the things we talked about last time, and we did not have an opportunity for a workshop, is that if we're going to continue on with the board requirement of 40 community service hours, we can't put a capstone on top of it.
No, I agree.
And I think we have to make the decision. Are we willing to go in one direction or the other? The opportunity for, because we'll have a first reading, second reading on a graduation policy when we finish up those proficiency, more than happy to bring a more detailed project forward, but if we're going to bring community service forward and try to put a capstone on top of it, I think we're adding one more item on top of what students need to do.
So your takeaway from tonight is what you want to know is not so much about the capstone, but do we want 40 hours of community service, or do we want to implement this capstone in its place moving down the road philosophically, and then the time frame?
Right.
Chris, have you had a chance to poll staff regarding this? Because I'm sure a lot of the staff would end up being mentors, even though it's
We've had a chance to talk about it through the committee level. We've also had a chance to talk about it with our department heads. There's quite a bit of interest, especially as we're looking for ways to be able to, for students to be able to meet the guiding principles and additional opportunities for students to do that. Quite a bit of interest through staff in order to be able to do that. The one concern from staff is that what happens if 23 kids want to have one person as a mentor on staff? What do we then limit? That was one of the greatest concerns. And then there was also some concern shared about having members of the community sign off on projects or signing off on elements of the project. And one of the great conversations we had is that little slip that you have in front of you, right now we have members of the community who are signing off on community service hours and that graduation requirement, and we don't well, occasionally we'll get one that's forged, but for the most part, those will just basically get recorded, and we take the word of the individuals in the community. So those are a couple of the concerns that were put on. And then the concerns of, let's be careful about not adding one more thing on top of the plate. If we're going to add something, we need to take away some things. But you know, those things that need to happen in order to create a mature project, you know, be more than happy to clarify those. But if it's just going to be, no, we're happy with 40 hours of community service, then we're happy with 40 hours of community service, and we'll pull the capstone project out. And that's really, I think, what we talked about last time. We really need to kind of make a decision. And if you need to have more information to make that decision, it'd be an opportunity during graduation policy, especially first reading or during that first reading, to have some additional information to clarify. And if we even, Kate, have to add it as an exhibit, we can do that.
Well, you know what, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's, I'm sorry.
Back to Diana's point, which was also a point that I was going to raise about the staff, and I think that's interesting. I think it goes back, you know, their concern of the validity and the rigor and all the things that we require of a class, and that, for me, and again, this is just first blush, but is part of the mentor packet. The expectation for the project and the template that they use, that somewhat stepwise should be standardized. I mean, I realize but as a staff member, perhaps that would demonstrate rigor, all that jazz. I can't remember all the jazz.
Rigor and relevance.
Yeah, that.
And I just, the other thing we haven't talked about also tonight is how do we also engage parents to work with students? Because I think of my own 3 children. I have a sophomore, 7th grader, 5th grader. Each of them have their own passion. and I can already, as I've kind of thinking through what would I want each one of them to do, I can think of people I could connect them as well with mentors to help shepherd that, and also to help them kind of pursue their passion. And what better way than doing it to, was kind of that final piece as they're heading off and then heading to something beyond high school. I can think of each one and how they pursue it differently.
Well, here's a question.
Mm-hmm.
Could a parent be a mentor?
Why not?
Okay. I just as a little phrase, I'm not a fan of the 40 hours of community service because I never really felt that it was relevant to the educational process. I'm 100%, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair if I didn't think that community service wasn't important. But I want to make it meaningful. And so I was a proponent for the service learning. But now this seems like a big bite to me only because I'm an old dog and it's a new thing. And again, I like to know the details, but that's just my personality. But for the bigger picture, I think there's a lot of learning that can be had with a capstone if we do it thoughtfully and carefully and have all the pieces in place. And I would certainly be willing to forego the 40 hours for a thoughtfully crafted capstone project.
I had like, again, sort of weed questions that are not important right now. I mean, there's the quality assurance and a variety of things. I would be willing to forego the community service for the capstone. I think in some ways just calling it capstone makes it seem such high stakes.
Mm-hmm.
That it's almost, I understand what you're saying, but we might want to call it something different just because it just sounds like it's the culmination and it's huge. But we have to make it not be so huge. It's an important piece and an exciting piece and a challenging piece. But when you use the word capstone, it even makes me feel like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's it.
No, it does.
Do or die.
Yeah, do or die. So, but I would be willing to give the community service hours. I think they're valuable. They're useful. I don't know if they've done as much as what you all hoped back when you first started them. So I like the idea of the capstone project. Again, the label is probably more of a difficulty with, and you do have a lot to work on to get the chunks, the pieces, so students can actually achieve it. When we get to where we're actually at proficiency-based, a concern would be those students who haven't met proficiency by senior year and have this to do. Sounds pretty overwhelming. But that's partly what's going on with proficiency-based. So we hope that nobody's in that position by the time we have the proficiency-based.
And I think also with where we're going with proficiency-based, we're doing it in chunks, which is here's first year course, second year course, third year course, fourth. Here are the chunks that you are kind of taking along the way. I agree wholeheartedly with the points brought that this needs to be done in chunks as well.
Now, if this is begun before we have proficiency-based, so they still have credits, will students get credits for this too, or can they take it for credit?
Their credit would be that they're completing the requirement for the diploma.
It would be a graduation.
It would be a graduation requirement.
requirement. Okay,
Yeah,
just
place
as
of the
the community service. Okay.
Right.
Okay, but not any particular.
Because right now with the 40 hours, they don't
There's no
receive any
credit.
credit.
This is a different element of work to it to me, though, than community service.
Oh, by
Right.
far.
So it has
More
an
intense.
academic piece. So I don't know if it's possible for a student who needed credits to graduate could use this for credits. Those who don't. It's just a suggestion. It might be for somebody that would give them a little more motivation to do that if they needed some graduation credits, because it definitely feels different than going and raking leaves in terms of the kind of work it is. So getting
Just a little.
credits. Yeah. So that's just one thought. But I'm willing to forego the community service.
Ayana has been, I think,
Yeah,
having a bit
all
to
right,
talk,
please.
so.
I personally think that 40 hours of community service doesn't really have the same meaning as it used to necessarily. And I'll give you an example. There are teachers who will say at the end of the year, hey, I need 5 kids to come in and take down the posters in my room, and I'll give you all an hour or 2 of community service. But if you have 5 kids in your room and you have 10 posters, it's not going to take you 2 hours to take down the posters. And so, I get a lot out of the community service that I do. I volunteer at the soup kitchen. I volunteer at the Polar Express, which is probably the most fun thing I've ever done.
Cool.
But those kinds of you know, this doesn't have any proof that you did something worthwhile for the community. And so I think that foregoing the 40 hours is really valuable, and that the capstone is valuable because, like, it's something that you're passionate about, that you'll be able to see the value of in the work that you do. And kind of going, I mean, it goes towards the actual, like, outline of the project. The most daunting part for me would be the presentation to a panel at the end. And so I don't know if you were there at our school board luncheon the other day. It came up with Mr. Prince and Christine Hessler that it might be better to do like a science fair type deal, like you mentioned, like a community event, and then we'd have, so say I was doing a project on, you know, wanting to be a member of the school board. And so I would have my trifold set up or whatever in the gym, and there would be 5 to 10 given, like, graders, I guess you could say, who would be members of a panel, or they could just walk around and pretend to have, you know, a normal conversation, but really they'd be grading your project rather than sitting here and just presenting your project. And that, you know, that could be valuable for students who don't want to get up in front of a panel because they don't have confidence in their public speaking skills. So that, you know, that was brought up at some point. So I think that was something that was brought up by student council members that I think would be a good alternative to students who, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally can't stand in front of 10 people and give a 10, 15-minute presentation on something they've done, even if there is a lot of value in it and they're passionate about it.
Interesting.
Point.
All right, I'm just going to throw something out here. As we've been sitting here talking about some of the challenges of doing a project like this in the senior year, where you've got the college admissions and the applications and everything else that's going on, trying to make up credits or whatever, would it be possible to do it for the end of a junior year? And my thoughts behind that is because there's a lot of value in this capstone, and the methodology that a student would use to get to that final presentation and you know, the whole process would have a lot of value for that student in the senior year. You know, whether it's how to utilize mentors, how to utilize resources. I mean, all this stuff would be extremely helpful when it comes to choosing colleges, applying for colleges, financially. Like, it just would help them. I mean, the whole thing about a capstone, you know, not only is it the educational value, but a lot of it's the learning, the methodology, the process of how to approach a problem, how to, you know, have an end that you need to get to, and, you know, coming up with those toll gates along the way. And that can be applied to some of the challenges that students face in their senior year. So it's a little outside the box, but
Something good to write about in your college essays, too.
absolutely. So, and it would alleviate, you know, not having that
One of
extra
my
thing in the senior
One
year.
of my concerns about that is right now the end of junior year is beginning to be very jammed up. I'm not sure if Christine's had a chance to come and talk about Smarter Balance coming. We have right now, it's looking at about 12 hours of testing that will be happening junior year. Plus so we're going from April vacation on, so 12 plus hours of Smarter Balance, plus state required science testing, SATs if students want to take them. In addition, we have the month of May with AP testing. It is that spring, there's some concerns already with the amount of assessment that we're going to be required to do of students, or students who are then going to be choosing to do assessments. My worry is that the end of that junior year now is just becoming very, very difficult, and I would just worry about adding an additional requirement for students to finish, given now all of state requirements and other requirements that are going to now be placed upon them, starting from April vacation on. In fact, I'm worried about our students with test fatigue and some of the pressures of that, because we're moving away from what we had presently, which was an SAT Saturday, usually the first week of May, and maybe a couple of days of testing in March with the MEA Science. Now all of that for Smarter Balance is the 10 to 12 hours. That's just testing time. That doesn't include the other administrative parts. Starting, the last 12 weeks of school, we have the option this year of giving students the SAT on April 15th for free, which we're going to pursue because I think for a number of our challenge kids that's that. And then we go right into the month of May, which is AP testing for almost the entire month. So my only worry with that would just be adding another thing on top, whereas senior year, once we get past, especially January, beginning of February, a lot of those requirements, once the college applications are done, first semester transcripts are sent out, things do begin to slow down a little bit for them, and there's a little bit of a breathing room. Go ahead, Jen.
Might also be the whole senioritis by the time April, February comes. You've done your applications. You're waiting. This could be really a kind of fun focus, especially if you made this something a fun project, not just the high stakes. So it may give a focus to the end of senior year, especially if there's not necessarily group work, but collaboration. And there's a sense in which this is a group project. So it might actually fill some of that. And there's if you finished your courses, your transcripts are out. Sort of, maybe not take as many courses second semester, so it might kind of fill some of that in for people. So it may actually be a great capstone in a way in terms of just how to finish your senior year, doing something really exciting and interesting and out of the box.
Yep. Well, one thing I do like about Pete's suggestion, and I think we would make this available to students, but if students wanted to tackle that end of junior year, looking at that summertime, especially summer, some can do summer jobs, some can't based upon their age and what's available to them if they wanted to get that head start. So it did become part of their college essays, so they're starting to make those decisions. I would absolutely encourage students to be able to do that. But, there's some concerns about what now it's going to happen between 1st of April now and the end of school in junior year, which as we know is one of the most difficult years of high school, and that tends to be the most complex schedules for students, adding this additional testing requirement on top of what they have to do already.
That's so interesting because at first that sounds like a great idea, but I do recall junior year, those grades that year are absolutely critical for junior year. And to put this on top of it then, I see now why that would be really difficult to accomplish. And I like it to your point of, they get pretty squirrely. After February.
Wait for that.
Not Ayanna, right?
No, she won't. Absolutely not. But for the most part,
she's not there yet, though. So
Maybe it's possible.
That's true.
That's true.
It would give some focus, and I would endorse not having senior finals, and have this in its place. I like that idea a lot.
I agree. I like the idea of doing a capstone, waiving the entire 40 hours of community service in place of this. And definitely need to get into the weeds and figure out what all that looks like, but I would endorse you moving forward to do that.
So what we can do is bring it forward as one of the exhibits, much like now exhibits for IKF, which is our current graduation policy, kind of outlines what community service looks like. We can start pulling together some pieces there. With that, would take a look.
What we do need to decide, though, being fresh off of the policy committee on Monday, is when you want to start this. Like, do you want to start phasing it in now and having this become part of the culture, or what are your thoughts on that?
I would prefer to start phasing it in. My only concern as I've been thinking about this is just we have freshmen now in the building who have started under one set of rules. Is there a transition period? Honestly, probably about 5% of freshmen have actually now completed something, but as far as community service hours.
We can phase it in with the incoming freshmen next year.
Well, 'cause it seems like there's still many pieces, the weeds pieces that have to be worked out, because those are pretty critical. Because I think it's a great idea, especially if you're not finding that the community service was meaningful for most kids. The only thing it did sound daunting and one more thing. So as long as there's an outline and we help them through, and I don't know, Ayana, when you first heard this, did it sound like, oh my, one more thing that I have to do, or?
It did kind of. I mean, the idea of having it a junior year would definitely be scary.
Yeah.
Junior year was insane. I don't know. I think maybe it is a little scary and daunting, but at the same time, if it's something that you're interested in,
Right.
and you can devote however much time you want to, and it's something that you can be proud of in the end. I don't know. I think it's a great idea. I mean, originally I was kind of skeptical of it, but after hearing a couple presentations on it, it sounds better, and I don't know. I think that there's definitely a way to move forward with it that will make it a little less daunting, like with an outline and like a mentor packet, or like how to help the student along, rather than have it be daunting the entire way through, because that's definitely something to think about, because there are kids who will wait until 2 weeks before the panel presentations.
Chris, the more we're talking, and this is such a great conversation, I don't think it would be fair to the freshmen to say, switch gears. We're in the middle of the year, and we really don't quite know what we're doing yet.
Right.
So I feel, what do you think would be a reasonable time frame as far as completion of the weeds that we all love to dwell in?
That's important.
Reasonable time frame would be the spring.
That you could come back and say, this is what it looks like, and then implement it for the current 8th grade class?
For the current 8th grade class. That's a reasonable amount of time. And part of this also is that we are still going full steam ahead with proficiency-based diplomas and what that looks like within our curriculum. So to have that additional bit of time would be great, but to bring it forward in the spring with the graduation policy, I think is reasonable. And also as we start to do 8th grade presentations in 2 months.
Oh, perfect.
2 months, at least we can start letting students know ahead of time, this is something to start thinking about. And then by the time that they're then to the high school, we can start to unroll some of these packets.
So all the current students at the high school will still have the 40 hours?
All the current ones in
Okay,
that
so
case
that
would
will
have
continue.
40 hours.
You were hoping maybe this freshman class, because it's only November, have that many done that many hours that you couldn't?
Yeah, but
I mean,
we don't even know what to tell them they're going to be doing.
Right.
But they have 3 years. I mean, they're only freshmen, and there's still 2 years to get that together. That's my thinking. So I can't imagine in 2 years you couldn't have this figured out. Or you want them to know now what they're going to have to do their senior year. That's what you're thinking.
I think that's easier.
Okay.
Plus to sell it, it's a cultural shift, and to sell it for the 8th incoming.
Okay.
Hey,
Okay.
this is part of your
Okay.
gig now.
Yeah.
Right.
Moving
That seems to
forward.
be-
But I bet that for you seems like a long time to get this started.
Yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, it's,
Okay.
I wish I could say right now capstone's the only thing on the plate of the high school.
Yeah.
There's a number of things that are going on, and obviously this is just as important. But again, the graduation policy is open right now, and I think while it's open, we need to have this discussion because once we get a chance to go ahead and pass that, it would be the opportunity to have that discussion and do it. I mean, we would not want to reopen that policy.
Okay.
For the purpose of this conversation.
Okay. So if you're comfortable with that timeline, then that's fine with me as well. So it would be that incoming freshman. Also, once you've done 3 or 4 years of this and students see what it's like and it's okay and that it's part of the culture, it will be very different as well. This is new and daunting, but that's going to be like 6 years before we start to have a culture of capstone.
Well, and it's almost, we go to the graduation policy now with 4 years of math. This class that just graduated was the first year with 4 years of math, and I remember having a board discussion. Is that something we can do? Is that something we can pull off? Well, we did that, and we still graduated all those students, and they still finished on time, and we made sure that all students had 4 years of math ending out. So, and the same thing with last year's group was the first group for senior personal finance and a senior civics. And we said, how are we going to go ahead and figure out how to make that happen? And we did it. So we'll figure out a way. And you're absolutely right, Jerry. Once it becomes part of the culture, then, and often for high schools, culture change is 3 weeks.
Yeah, we
What's-
forget
what's-
that, don't we? I forget that. They shift pretty quickly.
Mm.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did. How do we determine whether a student's capstone project is successful? I mean, with the community service, you have a quantitative thing of you got to complete 40 hours, turn in your slips. Whether you're checking those or not, I mean, they can say that they've done 40 hours. I'm just wondering, they come, they do the presentation, you don't necessarily know whether they've put 3 hours into researching this, whether they've put 25 hours in, or is there a way that you're going to be able to tell that? And what happens if the project isn't deemed, like, I don't know, is this a pass or fail thing, and what if they fail?
That's actually, it's a great question. And in the case of Berwick, they have a celebration rubric where very clear, and it's given to students ahead of time, here are the elements that you need to fulfill in order for this to be a successful project. And if you don't fulfill these, then you haven't completed your project for that particular case. I think that's another thing we need to give to kids right up front, and right up front with mentor check-ins, having mentors sign on, here's the day I met, here's what we discussed, here's the progress to date, and that we would use those for success along with a final rubric that says, here are the elements of the presentation, here are the elements that you've shown, you're showing the number of hours that you worked, keeping that diary, that log of what it is that you worked on, to say that in fact it is a quality project.
Good.
Yeah, that all needs to be elements of that.
Chris, I'm sorry, go ahead, Joshua.
I was gonna, on that point about making sure you have all the steps, and I would stretch it back throughout their high school career. So maybe freshman year you have to sign off on your, what is your project going to be a topic of, and pick your mentor, and then sophomore year you have to do this and that. So it becomes part of your high school experience. And then if we have that, thinking about what you're going to do for people who transfer in the middle, some of the weeds that we need to get into also. If you get their junior year and everyone else is halfway done
We
with
just
their
take down the
research
vacancy
and
sign. It's actually, we have to do that now for community service with students who, if you come in your junior year, you only do 20 hours of community service. You don't do the 40.
And that's a little bit easier because it's only 20. It's not that so if you move in junior year, you haven't done your proposal and you haven't set up the time with your mentor. So there's going to
be some elements of that transition.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking to our meeting on Monday about one of the new pieces in the graduation, and there's a lot of new pieces, but one of the new pieces is the personal learning plan, which students are supposed to have, which were in the minutes, but it's probably new information for you guys. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the personal learning plan as it relates to the capstone.
Sure. Well, the personal learning plan that's in the policy, think about it with transition planning. What is that goal that you're aiming for after Wyndham High School? And you know, I think the students are sick of me saying this, but Wyndham High School is not your final destination. You're going somewhere beyond Wyndham High School. And part of that personal learning plan are what are the courses that I'm going to take along the way in order to get me to that point where I can make the decision at the end, where am I going to next? And so, you know, part of that PLP, you know, one thing we could actually take a look at is within Naviance, which is the program we'll be using to kind of track those personal learning plans, can we add elements of that capstone project so that kids can be meeting milestones along the way to say, well, this is what I got to do next and move forward. Because one beauty within that program is that you can set reminders and other things to say this needs to be done by such and such a date, and it keeps coming back to say, in fact, that you need to do that.
I like melding the two. That makes sense to me, and there's the plan then. And
Right.
that's a nice dovetail between the two of them.
And the big part of that plan is, here's my goal, what are the courses that I need to take in order to be prepared, and even now within the program, it's to what level of courses do I need to be taking in order to then be ready for that particular part. So we'd have to work with some of the software folks, but I think we can meld that in there.
I would definitely put that on my list.
Yep, as a requirement. because it is all about a plan and transition planning. And you know, we do it for our special education students. It's an element starting, I think, age 14, 15. As part of every IEP, we talk about what their transition plan is going to be, what are they going to be doing once they leave Wyndham High School, what are the skills that they're acquiring. I think in the personal learning plan, we're now doing that for every student. You know, so
Well,
that
this
students.
seems like a lovely marriage.
Yep. Students are ready. So, you know, if you have a passion about something, to be able to say, how am I going to prepare myself for that passion? But also, Ayana, going back to your performance, you know, if I'm a student who performing arts is my thing, there's also isn't a reason why a final thing couldn't be a performance. Doesn't necessarily have to be a speech.
About your point about like choosing your topic freshman year, I had to choose a topic freshman year, so if this had been implemented my freshman year, I would have wanted to do something with like biomedical research or whatever. And then I took chemistry and biology and realized that's not my passion. Junior year, or between my freshman and my sophomore year, I went to Brazil for the summer, and then all of a sudden I had this epiphany that like I want to be an immigration lawyer. And so going into junior year, I would have chosen something else. So would there be some kind of
Flexibility.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, if I chose my chemistry teacher as my mentor and then decided I wanted to change my project, she or he might not be the best mentor for me going forward for a different project.
I had that thought too, that freshman year seems
Early.
rather early
You
to
really
try
don't
to
know what you're
figure out.
doing.
Because I think for a freshman, it's going to sound like a
Whatever.
large project.
Yeah.
And at that point, to plan that out for your senior year, and you then probably would switch twice
Right.
along the way.
But it's a good idea to start early, but
Right.
I don't know that choosing your topic freshman year is the most efficient way to go about things.
But I think, I mean, even think back to your own experience, though. If you had made a decision and then the conscious process of then changing and making a new decision might have saved you also some funds for your freshman year, going away to school, thinking that this is it. I mean, even that process of reflecting to say, is this still a relevant topic for me, is actually, I think, a great part of the learning process to say, well, you know what, maybe I don't want to go in this. And it forces you on these milestones to say, this is a good thing for me to do, or guess what, this isn't for me. And I think this is a new direction. And I think a challenge is going to be is just working on mentors. But, you know, even at the last thing, again, back to when they had the college and career fair, some great people from some great industries, not only in Wyndham and Raymond, but also in Greater Portland, saying they want to continue on with this partnership. And this would be a great opportunity and great experience and exposure for our students in order to be able to do this.
So you have your answer?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So then what do we need to do next? What are you looking, is it back to policy?
I think it goes back to policy. It will come back to you for the weed dwellers. It will come back to you as an exhibit when we look at IKF.
Actually, just as, I think it would be helpful for us, just from a confidence standpoint, that we need to hear from you again about the weeds. We need to hear from you what does this look like from beginning to end? The mentor packet or whatever we need, a touch base. I mean, policy still, in a generic way, capstone is going to be embedded in this. But I think for us to be able to communicate to the community this change, we need to know what the change is pretty intimately.
Can we look at a February?
Whenever, I mean,
However long
however
it takes you to
for
organize
make
the
it
weeds.
right.
We have some other things that we need to move here
yeah.
pretty quick on some policy, not policy, but on some things we're building for efficiency-based diplomas.
I mean, as
Next
far as
couple
I'm
months.
concerned, I don't know when you meet with the 8th graders. When do you meet with them?
I meet with them usually 1st of March.
So, yeah, February and, because you want to have at least a thumbnail sketch of
Right.
what you're going to present to them. So February is probably right.
And we can act like 8th graders.
And we do.
I'm gonna go to that presentation. Right? Right?
You're good, I think.
Great.
Thank
So
you.
we good?
Can I put in a couple plugs while I'm here? Take advantage of a little, just want to kind of cap off what has been an exciting fall at Wyndham High School, and everything from, you know, our cross-country team going down to New England's for the first time. We placed in the high 20s, but it's the first time we've actually made it to a New England meet as a team. Girls cross-country team winning the sportsmanship banner, which to me is just as important as winning a state championship, being recognized by the league and your teams in the league for somebody they want to compete against. We have a newly formed math team that's up and running, has already been to 2 meets, has been doing well. We also have won a state championship, or our girls have won a state championship in girls soccer, and did it with a whole bunch of tenacity and grace as they went through that. We also have a group of boys playing football who we have some coaches put a great emphasis on leadership and winning the right way and doing the right thing on the field and off the field, and are now, you know, seeing the benefits of that. Get a chance to play on Saturday against Thornton Academy in a state championship game, which absolutely proud of. We've had an outstanding opening to our musical, and if you've not had a chance to go see 42nd Street, take some time this weekend, go see 42nd Street. It's Friday night, Saturday night, and then I think Sunday afternoon. Absolutely amazing cast. Kids have been working on this for the last 2 years with taking tap lessons and all the other things required to do that. Definitely some tap scenes where we've got 40 to 50 kids who are simultaneously tapping. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And so it's been a great fall at Wyndham High School. And so very, very proud of our students, and very, very proud of how they're conducting themselves, not only in school but in the community, and how they're representing both communities. They're doing a great job of that, and also looks like it's going to be a fun winter. So for those of in the public, you know, thank you for your support, but also, you know, it's been a great season. I think it's going to be a great Saturday.
What time on Saturday?
11 o'clock. And the high school has been granted away, which means we get the sunny side bleachers. We won't be in the shade for that 11 o'clock game, so it'll be the warm side.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, we are now going to shift into our business meeting. So Sandy, if I could have a roll call.
You sure can. Kate Bricks,
Here?
Eric Colby, Jennifer Fleck,
Here.
Diana Freusling,
Here.
Marge Cavoni, Pete Hensler,
Here.
Jen Moore,
Here.
Don Dillon,
Here.
Jerry Keane Dwyer,
Here.
Diana Masil.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda is appointments.
I move to approve the appointment of the following employees for the 2014-15 school year. Michelle Patch, guidance 1 year only, expire 6/2015, Wyndham Primary School.
Second.
Sandy, is this a replacement or?
For 1 year.
Okay. All those in favor? It's unanimous. And next on the agenda is policies. And Kate, if you would just like to
Sure.
give a quick review.
Yeah. There are 2 policies that you will be voting on. First is JICK, which is the harassment, sexual harassment, hazing, and bullying of students. We are doing a second reading. The first reading was 10/15/14. At that time, Dawn had presented to the board the reasons for the changes, which are really minor. They're on page 5 of 6. Involves the last line and some cross-references. This is a result of a legal and federal review to make sure that we're in compliance with the law. We take this policy very seriously. We are in total and complete compliance, so this is just a second reading. Do you want me to continue, or do you want to vote on that first, or you want me to just keep going with the next
No,
one?
that's, yeah, let's.
Okay. Okay.
Speak about the next one. So did anybody have any questions about that? No, okay. We had a second.
We didn't read it.
We didn't read it.
No.
I'm sorry. Did somebody make a motion then?
I move to approve the second reading of the revised harassment, sexual harassment, hazing, and bullying of students policy, file code JICK.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous? And Kate, if you want to speak to the
Yep.
next transportation.
The next one is EEAC. It's the Wyndham Raymond School Bus Transportation Policy. It was last approved May 26, 2010. Just for a little historical information, this was a result of consolidation of both the Raymond and the Wyndham policy. And it took a lot of work, to be really honest, to make this come together. We spent a lot of time on it. We had a lot of public input, and the biggest change was trying to be more efficient, which was the whole point of consolidation anyway. And so there was a lot of work around consolidating bus stops. And the sitting board at the time felt that this was really critical. This is a budget item of over $1 million that is operational in nature and does not really have any educational, I mean, it gets our kids to school, but it's a lot of money, and we wanted to be as efficient as possible. This policy was opened up primarily because we're looking at 2 other transportation policies, and we wanted to make sure that this broader policy meshed well and made sense with the other 2, which will be coming before you soon, I hope. So, the changes are the first page, the last sentence. I mean, these are very, I mean, from a policy standpoint, this is very small change. Timing changes, page 2 was a header change to include Manchester. It previously said Wyndham Raymond. And then page 3, there was a title change and a revision to this sentence structure. There's absolutely no really change other than this little minor stuff. So it's been reviewed by the policy committee. We definitely had Mike Kelly, the transportation director, come before us and look it over to see if there was anything additional that he felt would assist in his operations. And he was happy with these changes, and so that's why they've come before you.
Did you have a question? Okay. Someone could make a motion then?
I move to approve the first reading of the revised Wyndham Raymond School Bus Transportation Policy, file code EEAC.
Second.
All those in favor? It is unanimous. And finally, we have scheduled board roundtable. This is a time for anybody to address the community, school news, which Chris just gave us a bunch. Does anybody start with Jen? Did you have anything to add or? Nothing?
Not for me.
For me,
Nada.
Anything?
Just good luck to the football team. Congratulations to the Lady Eagles. And good luck with the performances for 42nd Street. And that's it.
Did you have anything?
I mean, Mr. Howell kind of covered
I know
it all.
you kind of
but,
did. I say you probably took the wind out of your sails there.
I was going to say, I went and saw 42nd Street. It really is amazing. So if you haven't gone, I can't reiterate enough that you should go. And you should buy your tickets for AmFam, because that's coming up on December 6th. So, yeah.
Okay.
We're talking December.
All right. Well.
oh, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Yes. Thanksgiving.
All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
We need a second.
Oh, sorry.
Second?
Thank you. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
Sure.